Yo, what's happening, guys? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review. Today, we need to discuss some system reveals. So, we're living in pretty interesting times right now. Of course, we all know that just last week, Sony finally unveiled what the PlayStation Neo was actually supposed to be, and of course, it turned into the PlayStation 4 Pro. And that was something that I don't really think it was what people were expecting. It was certainly underwhelming, to say the least. I don't think it's quite the worst thing in the world. You, of course, have people who are all over the board. Some people who think it's a fine decision. Some people who think it's a very questionable decision, maybe putting that a little bit lightly. I'm kind of coming down somewhere in the middle, which I know is kind of the easy way to go about something like this, but it's just really how I feel. And on the podcast this week, we discussed it at length, so I've kind of shared my feelings about it quite a bit. I did make a video catching up on it a couple of days later, because I was, of course, on vacation when that actually happened, unfortunately. But through that, we all know that the other big thing that we're waiting for, the humongous, gigantic, gargantuan elephant in the room, is now Nintendo with their system reveal and what's going to be happening with the NX, which we've all talked about 2 million times, myself, of course, included. Now, the reason we live in such interesting times is, as we all know, this 8th generation is a complete freaking mess. There are some great games, and I love all three consoles currently for sure, but it's a mess. Everyone's coming out with new hardware. I've talked about that many times. Sony was the first to come and actually show us what they're doing, not because of the Slim, but of course because of the Pro. We know that Microsoft is working on whatever they're calling as the Scorpio now, and whatever that's going to turn into sometime next year. Maybe the name stays, maybe it doesn't, but we know they're trying to make what they're touting as the most powerful system ever created, and it probably will be the most expensive as well. And it's of course trying to break down walls of generations. I made a 15-minute rant about that. If you want to watch it, you can definitely check that out. So we know that those two companies are working on their machines, and Nintendo, of course, is starting their actual next generation machine with the NX. Through this, I wanted to compare what Nintendo might be doing or what they should do to what Sony just did. And this is not the first time I've talked about this, so bear with me here. I'm not trying to retread the same territory or use the same tired topics that I've personally discussed before in a video. But I think that it kind of has a little bit more context now that Sony's actually had their I don't want to call it a press conference, a meeting, quote unquote. That's what they called it. It was a meeting, not a press conference. Sony has finally publicly to the world shown what this system is supposed to be. They're the first one to actually show it to us. And it kind of gets me wondering, what is it that Nintendo should do? And again, we have talked about this. I've talked about this. Does Nintendo do it in a Nintendo Direct? Do they do it in a live press conference or meeting sort of fashion? Do they do it where it's really neither, but it's still some sort of online presentation? Because we have to remember that Nintendo could still release a 30 or 40 minute, online streaming presentation that isn't truly a Nintendo Direct. We all use that form because that phrase, I should say, because we're used to that format from Nintendo. But it doesn't quite have to be like that. Remember, the digital events aren't really like Nintendo Directs either. They're similar, but I think that they're different enough. And what if they did something that's even further differentiating itself from those two formats? So I really see Nintendo as having three potential opportunities. Sony, with what they did, this is kind of what sparked my whole want to talk about this real quick and make a comparison. What Sony did was definitely confusing, and I think that that's why it's kind of having a mixed reception. They had something that I think people expected to be like a press conference, and people wanted to be like a press conference, and they were expecting the excitement and the glitz and the pomp and circumstance and the music and the wild action and all these crazy things, and it really wasn't that. When I went back and rewatched it, a few days after it aired, I realized that was not at all what they were shooting for. They wanted a very calm and quiet, just literally a meeting that happened to be live streamed. Something maybe probably more akin to what they do normally behind closed doors within the industry, what a lot of these companies do. But in this fashion, they decided to still make it a little bit larger in scale. I think they had a couple hundred industry insiders there, and it was actually live streamed. Because of that, and people's expectations for an E3-like event, it got a little bit kind of confusing and muddled and maybe felt disappointing when people saw it was really just more of a meeting. It was a couple of quiet conversations presenting the ideas of what the Pro is supposed to be. Granted, when you look at the Pro as a unit, I do think it's only just okay. It's probably it's not answering a lot of the needs that people are wanting. It's pushing some of the wrong ideas forward, like 4K and display ability, but not actually what's changing or influencing games. And it's this whole next gen but not next gen half step thing. So that's a whole different conversation what the Pro actually is. But as far as the presentation, they tried to do a live in-person thing and stream it, and it kind of backfired, is the long story short here. is what they tried to do unfortunately wasn't exciting, and it didn't meet people's expectations for presentation, and that can unfortunately retroactively also impact people's reception of whatever it is you're showing, which is kind of what's happening with the Pro. Do we want Nintendo to do the same thing? Absolutely not. I, of course, want Nintendo to knock it out of the park. Whatever they plan on doing with the NX as a machine, with their ecosystem and their business model going forward, and with the presentation and reveal of the NX, I want it to be fantastic. I want it to be spectacular. I love Nintendo. I love the Wii U. They've made stupid mistakes. The Wii U is a failure. I want to see them come back and just absolutely blow people's socks off. I think they have the ability to do that, and I do think that's what they're trying very hard to do, which is probably one of the many reasons we know that they're holding off finally showing us the damn thing. And it's weird when you think about sometime in the next couple of weeks. I just talked about this. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, we're finally going to step over this invisible line, you guys, and we will actually know what the NX is, and it will forever no longer be a mystery. And that's going to be really wild and really exciting, and I just can't wait for that. But they have to do it right. So I definitely don't want Nintendo to do what Sony did. I mean, there's no reason to think that they should emulate Sony's presentation of the PS4 Pro, because it just didn't help. You have to wonder if Sony had a really kick-ass, more exciting presentation that was done to the public, not behind closed doors, but to the public. Maybe, subconsciously people would be speaking about the Pro a little bit more positively, but perception is key. And the way that happened, people perceived it as maybe a boring step as far as hardware goes, because the presentation itself was boring. So Nintendo can't be boring, that's obvious. Now, I've said this before, and I'm going to say this again because I still feel this way even after seeing Sony's botched and lackluster presentation of the Pro. I personally still want Nintendo to do this in person and live in front of an audience. I really, really do. There's a lot of arguments people can make to the effect of, well, it doesn't really matter if it's live. Sometimes it's awkward. Mistakes can happen when it's live. Maybe there's a problem with like a display and a monitor goes out, or maybe someone isn't an entertaining speaker, and all these different things. And those are pretty valid concerns and critiques. I get that sometimes is true. But personally, I just don't care, because I think that as much as I like an exciting Nintendo Direct, and as much as I love digital events when they go really well, I think it is the future of presentations. I'm someone who's, maybe because I'm an older gamer who's been doing this for a very long time, I have that nostalgic attachment to press conferences, and I think that the benefits of a room full of excited people when a presentation is happening on stage and people are there, oohing and ahhing and clapping and all those, goofy things, I think that carries a lot of weight in terms of presentation and excitement only. Obviously, it's not going to make a product better. It's not going to make the games or the graphics or the gameplay or the controller or the new hardware necessarily better. But it does help with that perception, which again was what impacted Sony negatively. They weren't exciting. They had a room full of people who weren't into it, and they very purposely made it slow and boring. And now people are like, well, maybe the Pro isn't for me. Whereas potentially they could have changed it with an exciting conference, which I've already said. So I really like the idea of Nintendo still going live. I don't think that Sony's botched press conference or meeting, whatever you want to call it, should be an indication that no, we shouldn't go live. I think there's honestly still, to be fair, a very good chance that Nintendo doesn't go live. They might still do some sort of online presentation and some online put-together package that shows off what it is. And that would be exciting. I'd still be ready for it, and it could still be the most amazing thing, and it could be the perfect way to show off the NX. I mean, honestly, depending on what the NX truly is, it might more warrant an online presentation as opposed to a live press conference. But with any luck, that's not the case, and I feel like when you look at the most successful press conferences that have happened in TGS history and E3 history and Gamescom history and way back in the CES days for you old-timers like me, like those moments, you can't duplicate those, and you can't replicate that kind of action and excitement and whimsy just through an online presentation, as great as those can be. So it's a mixed bag, and you can go any way. I do think that most importantly, excuse me, Nintendo needs to learn from the mistakes that Sony did make, not necessarily be afraid to hold an in-person event, invite a bunch of different insiders for different publications and websites and YouTube channels and all these different things within the industry, invite them to Washington or LA or New York or wherever they'd want to do it. Invite these people out, fly them out, show them a good time. The way these things normally happen, I say that because that is kind of how it happens, is they fly people out throughout the industry to come and cover the event. So if Nintendo does something like that, which also don't forget they did do with the Wii U, people always forget that, but in 2012, earlier in the year, I want to say, I don't know, like August or something, even though the Wii U had already been revealed, they had a final in-person Wii U only press conference where they showed games, they gave a price, they gave an official date, they showed features like Nintendo TV and the controller. They did that. And I think that that was smart, and I think that that was great. I actually very much enjoyed that. That's when we saw Call of Duty running on the Wii U. It's when they announced that Bayonetta 2 was coming to the Wii U and exclusive. And Reggie did a great job, and that was very cool. So they could do something like that again if they do it the right way. Don't make it boring. Don't make it like a formal meeting with a bunch of business partners like Sony did. You can't drop the ball with the NX the way Sony did with the PS4 Pro. I think that Nintendo knows that. And like I said a couple of minutes ago, I think that one of the many reasons they're holding off to show us the NX is because they're really making sure that whenever they finally do it, it's the best version, the best idea of a presentation they could possibly have to get across the idea of what the NX is, make it exciting, show us the games that are coming, and make us understand why this is the future of Nintendo that we should believe in for now. So it's going to be interesting to see. And of course, Microsoft, I mean, they're probably just going to show the Scorpio at E3 next year. That'll be fine. I'm curious. I can't say I'm excited to see it, but I'm curious, just to see what they're doing with it. I like Microsoft. I like the Xbox. So I'd like to see that be awesome and successful, but it's still more iterative design and upgrades, and it's part of the weirdness that is the 8th generation. Kind of just like the NX is too. It's too bad that the Wii U couldn't last a full 8th generation, but that's the world we live in. The PS4 Pro presentation was boring, and that's the world we live in too. So what's going to happen with Nintendo and the NX? How much of what Sony did might they borrow? What should they avoid that Sony did? Or are they going to do something completely different? And I think that there's a 50-50 chance that they do either or. So what do you guys think about this? What did you think of Sony's presentation of the PS4 Pro? What do you think of the Pro overall? What do you think about Nintendo's approach to the NX? What do you think they're going to do? What would you like them to do? What should they borrow from Sony and not? So many different angles to come at this from. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.